are you being held back due to some type of tradition? Are you being held back due to some type of information or something that's been passed down that you've never really taken time to process on whether or not that's true, one? But then two, is that still applicable in your life?
Welcome to Impact and Fulfillment with Coach Mike D, where you'll gain practical wisdom and dynamic insight from amazing conversations to live your best life.
What's going on, y'all? This is Coach Mike D with another episode of Impact and Fulfillment. Hope you're having a great day. Hope you're making fun happen. I hope you're impactful. I hope you're being, impactful and gaining fulfillment in what you do, throughout your life and are prioritizing that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I really want you to live impactful and fulfilling lives. That's what this thing is all about. But thinking about the concept of impact and fulfillment, at times you have to reflect and think through why you do or why you say certain things. Okay. So last week I made a post on social media and it was just basically my thoughts in the moment. And it was surrounding growing up. I had constantly heard this phrase, or what I thought was a specific proverb, that an idle mind is the devil's playground, right? And it was this concept that was floated around, and it's like I heard it from multiple places across the board in different settings growing up, to the point where you almost think that it's something biblical, right? Now, again, I grew up in the church. I'm still a member of a church. I've read the Bible cover to cover numerous times, numerous Bible studies. And, we talk about faith and, all of that on a very regular basis. And my goal is to live it out as well. But this whole notion of the idle mind is the devil's workshop, or the idle mind is the devil's playground, is kind of an interesting perspective, because when I made that post last week, some of the comments that, followed were, dude, that's not biblical, or that's not scripture. And again, I've read the Bible cover to cover. And yes, to that point, I do not remember ever seeing the idle mind is the devil's workshop, or the idle mind is the devil's playground, right? And so it's funny to go back and really think about it, because it made me think about things that we repeat, things that we recite, things that we do that we've not necessarily gone through and verified the validity or the truth in those statements. Because that statement is kind of loosely connected to, a biblical translation of Proverbs 16:27, which says, "An idle hands are the devil's workshop." And that's one of the various translations of that particular scripture. But it's interesting because that's a later translation. But the thing that I remember growing up was idle mind being the devil's playground, or an idle mind being the devil's workshop. And the post that I made last week was all about that concept. I think led a lot of us to prioritize being busy, or a lot of those that were parents or grandparents always wanting to keep, especially really active kids, busy, because they didn't want them to have an idle mind, because then if we sit with ourselves, then we'll kind of drum up issues, right? And part of the point of me making that post was, that's kind of a tongue twister. Part of the point of making that post was all about thinking about, did that serve us well in trying to keep individuals busy? Because we fast forward now as adults, and a lot of us have issues sitting with our own thoughts, or sitting by ourselves, or sitting in peace and really processing things. We have this concept, or we have this notion of being perpetually busy. And I was making the post about that possibly being a lead in to this society now where people just want to go, 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 go. But in doing so, it was called out that that's not a scripture. And thinking about it now, it makes me process and think about how many things were we told, or how many things throughout life do we repeat and maybe they aren't true, or how many things do we think are scripture, but the reality is we've never really taken time to dive into specifically understanding whether or not this is scripture, right? It's fascinating. And again, this can apply to people who are of different faiths and different belief structures and all of that. I'm talking specifically from my experience. And it's interesting because it can also lead into how we do things in life. Like there was a story, I believe it was from Dear Abby or something from the newspaper years ago, but I remember my mom telling it to me. And again, this may be some type of story that's told over and over in different settings, but the way that it was told to me was it was this young lady who had just gotten married, and she was going to make dinner for her new husband. And as she was making dinner, or she was getting her dinner prepared, she was going to cook a roast because her husband really liked roast. And so she called her mother and asked her mother how her mother prepared, the roast. Her mother told her what to do. You put the roast in the pan, and her mother told her to cut the end off of the roast and then season it a certain way, put it in the oven. She made the roast. It came out fine. But then the husband of this new wife asked, "Why did you cut the end off of the roast?" And she said that, well, that's how my mother always did it. And so I just did it like she did it. So when she then asked her mother why she cut the end off the roast, she told her that, hey, that's how my mother did it. Your grandmother did it this way. So the young wife, or the new bride, called her grandmother to ask her, why did she cut the end off of the roast, in making this preparation? And the grandmother said, well, I never had a pan big enough to fit the whole roast, so I had to cut the tip off. See, it's interesting. Traditions get started. Things get passed around. We start repeating things, and we don't really know the origin or the source of the thing that we're repeating. And at times, we could be repeating something that's completely wrong. Or we could be repeating something that's completely out of context. Or we could be repeating something or doing something that's no longer applicable to us due to the new information, new resources that we have available. And so I'm bringing this up today on this podcast as we talk about or think through the lens of impact and fulfillment. Are you making the most impact that you can make in life, or are you being held back due to some type of tradition? Are you being held back due to some type of information or something that's been passed down that you've never really taken time to process on whether or not that's true, one? But then two, is that still applicable in your life? Because sometimes we're being held up and we're being held hostage to tradition. At times, we're being held hostage to things of the past that are no longer applicable today. And that might be the block that's in the way that's keeping you from getting to where you're supposed to be and impacting, the lives that you're supposed to impact on the level that you're supposed to do it. That also might be limiting your level of fulfillment. You can't fully let go of this thing that's been told to you or that's been embedded in you, and you've never really taken time to determine whether or not that thing even needs to stay there. It's kind of like holding on to stuff in your house that you don't use anymore, you've never used, and you probably will never use again. You think about clothes. Most everybody, you have some people who are just perfectly organized and borderline minimalist, but for the vast majority of us, we have clothes in our closet that probably have not been worn in 10 years. We have shoes that we've worn twice in the last 15 years. We have jackets that, don't fit us anymore. We have all kinds of stuff that we just hold on to, thinking that, well, maybe I'll get into it again, or maybe I'll use it, or maybe I'll whatever, right? We make up all these stories. But the reality is those things are taking up space that something else could occupy. Those things are taking up space that something else could occupy. Think about impact and fulfillment. What thoughts, what traditions, what sayings, what habits, what, beliefs, what anything in your life are holding you back from being the engine of impact and the supercharger of fulfillment that you're capable of being in life? Like, what are those things? What are those things you need to get cleaned out? What are those things you need to verify? What are those things you need to check? What questions do you need to ask? Whatever it is or whatever they are, I'm going to encourage you to prioritize doing them right now, figuring them out right now so that you can start living right now on the level that you're supposed to and impacting the folks right now that you're supposed to and having the level of peace inside of you right now that you deserve. Okay? Well, hey, I hope y'all enjoyed this one. I hope it leads to something in you and in the lives of those that you're connected to that's magnificent. And if so, tell me about it. Hit me on social media at Coach Mike D, IG, TikTok, follow me on LinkedIn, wherever, right? Shoot me a message. Let me know how this one resonates with you. And as always, y'all be blessed, well, and wise. And I'll holler at you. Peace.
I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and follow Coach Mike D everywhere on social media. Y'all be blessed, well, and wise.